Ladies and gentlemen, another episode of There'll Be Horror. This one's going to be interesting. Luckily for everyone at home, we are wearing our clothes, specifically our pants. John, how you feeling today, buddy?
Feeling good. Yeah, you're right. When we mapped this episode out, we really weren't thinking about that this would happen. That all three movies we chose today prominently feature full frontal male nudity in it. It's really it was something that dawned on me in the third movie. I was like 3 for 3 this week. That's great.
Yeah, it's one of those where obviously, if we really would have thought about it, we'd be like, oh, maybe 2 out of 3. But with Men being a new release, there's like, we knew no idea what to expect. But I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, there's men, and men
yeah,
have penises, so
yeah. They
it's just
definitely
one of
do.
those things that sometimes it's just the triple feature. You know what I mean? It is what it is sometimes. Um, so this week is an interesting one because we could have technically gone Alex Garland movies, but his movies aren't horror. His movies are sci-fi. So we're like, what can we really link together with Men? Which, obviously not knowing 100% what it's about, probably being able to guess, but you never know. We decided we wanted to go with Midsommar, which is a breakup movie, and Under the Skin, which is a male abduction movie, apparently,
Yeah.
which we'll get into specifics there. So I guess I'll let you decide which one do you want to discuss first.
Let's go Under the Skin first. I think classifying Midsommar as a breakup movie is actually pretty genius because they definitely break up. But Under the Skin, let's talk about that first.
Okay. Go ahead. How many times have you seen Under the Skin before this time? Was this the first time, or have you seen multiple?
I've seen it. This is the second time I've seen it.
Okay.
And it's kind of exactly how I remember it. It's definitely an interesting concept, and just for those of you that haven't seen it, basically what we're given and what we're expected to understand is, Scarlett Johansson. It's basically centered around Scarlett Johansson. She is either an alien or some inhuman creature masquerading as a human. Let's put it that way. She's an inhuman masquerading as a human. And things aren't really fleshed out. Things aren't really explained, but she does abduct men. Like, she immerses herself in the human population. She abducts men into like a void, and they turn into sludge. And this happens over and over again throughout the movie. But she also has like a handler or a series of handlers that are also mysterious, just like motorcycle riding folks that they're kind of like her cleaner crew, like Harvey Keitel in Point of No Return. Like he's there, just he's there to clean up her mess. And the movie just kind of goes on like that, and then it ends. Yeah, and that's fine. It's perfectly fine for what it is. Did I do it justice?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Scarlett Johansson's character, it's like it's one of those things where I don't feel like they have an undertone of like why they're abducting these men. It's more of just it's the easiest way to feed themselves, whatever the alien creature is or whatever the being is that they're doing. So if you have a very attractive woman luring men, that's just kind of how it goes. I don't think it's a woman versus man type of thing, which we might get into later with some of these movies. So it's just an interesting parallel that the themes are in this movie it's a woman versus a bunch of men. I like that.
It turns into women versus men, I would say, because with the whole way that they're abducted, obviously it's exploiting men thinking they're going to have sex with her. So that's how they do it. And then at the end, not that it's intended to be that way, but the tables kind of turn on her character at the end.
The men chasing her, yeah,
right. And also the last man she's not intending to be with that last man. That last man kind of finds her, and he tries to take advantage of her. Yeah. No. After that,
okay.
The deformed guy, she takes back, and she takes pity on him, and lets him go, and that creates problems for the motorcycle dudes, who then decide they're gonna. Then she runs because she knows that that's gonna piss the motorcycle guys off, I imagine. And I shouldn't even call her she. It runs.
Yeah.
And then she flees. She's with that one guy for 2 days, and then she runs out when they start having sex, because it's like that she's not having sex to abduct that guy. She just doesn't. She never had sex, I guess. Then she goes into the mountains, and then the final guy tries to rape her, and that's when everything kind of very quickly goes downhill. Not plot wise, but just for her character.
Yeah. So it's one of those where it's actually interesting because you would have assumed that this movie was directed by Alex Garland, the way that some of the themes are of like ScarJo's character of like you said, getting pity on that man. And it's one of those where it's the first opportunity she really got to kind of see things through a person's perspective and kind of have sympathy and realize that, even though he's not perfect and he's quote unquote ugly and deformed and all that stuff, he still has heart and sympathy, and he still has compassion, and it kind of shines a light on her slash its mind in a sense, and it kind of reflects of like, hey, these are people, you know what I mean, and what everything that I'm doing, I'm not just doing this to quote unquote other aliens or just beings, I'm doing this to a person. So it kind of grows that compassion. So it's kind of that AI sense that, like, what we got in, like, Ex Machina and stuff, and it's like seeing ScarJo's character kind of progress into not actually human, but kind of like trying to be human. So like growing those intimate moments with another man, and kind of like starting to have fear and all that stuff. It's really interesting. Yeah, this is a movie that's always fascinated me, and I've always loved it because like the horrors in this feel realistic. I mean, obviously it's sci-fi horror, but like it feels realistic in the sense of like, you could be lured into, kind of like how Buffalo Bill is horror, you know what I mean? Like you can be lured into this kind of thing. Like she's literally driving around a van. I love the guerrilla style filmmaking of this, where they're literally just, essentially interviewing people in Scotland.
Yep,
yeah.
Scotland.
And it's like, it's one of those where it's like the authenticity of this movie makes it feel so real and even more scary. Cause it's like, oh my God, like this stuff like this could really be happening. Obviously not in a sci-fi, perspective and, approach, but like, it's really creepy. It's beautiful. The score is great. Every time going into, like you said, the void, all that stuff, the way it's shot, and just kind of the different frames it uses, and just like the actual like CG of turning them into the sludge, like all that is awesome. Like I've loved this movie for a long time. And like,
and let me say one thing, stunt wise, that burn effect at the end, fantastic burn stunt. Going back to Firestarter last week, that burn stunt at the end of the movie is a long lasting, crazy, dangerous burn stunt. And I give total respect to that stunt. Whoever that stunt performer was, kudos to them.
Yeah. And everything that goes on towards the end with ScarJo's character of just kind of getting torn up and beat up, and essentially shedding its skin, you know what I mean, and all that stuff, and it's a great metaphor. And yeah, I love this movie. It's definitely obviously super underrated. Like of the three, this is probably the niche pick, because if this wasn't A24 or ScarJo, no one would know about this movie really. So
I think a lot of people still don't know about it.
Yeah, and that's a shame, because obviously there's different moments of interpretation. There's just stuff you have to accept, whether it's the acting because they're not really actors, if it's just the slow pace because it's really, it's a trance, you know what I mean? And then also just the nature of some of the scenes, like the scene that, whenever I do talk about this movie, which isn't often, whenever I do, it's the scene on the beach when everything with the baby and all that stuff, and just that horror. And it does a great job of like implying the horror, but not overdoing it. And I feel like, the subtleties in this, like that's how, we'll talk about later of having, metaphors and, things that's, different symbolisms for, stuff. And I feel like this movie does a great job of showcasing, the metaphors and the different, stuff it's trying to teach and talk about, while not hammering you over the head, and still being weird, and still being, open to interpretation in some areas. Like I think this movie is great, and it's ironic because this is the same director that did the Under the Silver Lake, which that movie is definitely super weird. And I'm pretty sure now I'm second guessing myself, maybe that's a different A24 director. But yeah, final thoughts on this movie. Your initial thoughts going after you said this second watch, so your initial thoughts after your first watch, how does that compare to your initial your thoughts after this last rewatch?
Well, kind of like knowing what's going to happen, it's not that I like or dislike the movie any less. I do think the one downfall of Under the Skin kind of is the fact that the plot is very repetitive, and then it just then it escalates at the end. The set, there's a lot of maybe too much setup. I think they could have done a lot more with this topic. They could have fleshed things out a little more. Though I understand some directors and some writers do that on purpose. I don't think necessarily this movie needed that. I do think they did waste a lot of time in the beginning just doing the same repetitive, like lure and sink and lure and sink and lure and sink, and then things get out of control, and then she's human. Then what they could have done is they could have started the humanization arc earlier, and probably done a lot more of that. I feel the end suffers because the beginning drags on for too long. Not that I dislike the movie. I'm just giving my honest criticism of this movie and the way it's paced. And that's really the only downfall, just the pacing in the movie. But I do like it. I think Scarlett Johansson's great in it. I buy it totally. Wish I knew more about what's going on, but I understand that that's being deliberately done. So for me, this is a solid like 3.5, just for my own personal feelings about it. But I like it.
That's fair. And yeah, I made the mistake because the Under the Silver Lake, obviously it starts with the same title of Under the Skin. So that's Mitchell, and then he did It Follows, not this one.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, this is the same director as Sexy Beast, which is weird because that they're nothing alike. So that's an interesting thing. But yeah, so like I said, this movie is one that I've loved, from day one, and this is a 5-star movie. Like, this is in my top 250. I never get a chance to talk about it because it's so underrated. So it's probably one of the ones that people don't realize that I've always loved, and that's why I'm pretty sure I was like quick to like recommend this, because I was like, regardless of how you feel about it or like what the discussion is going to be, it needs to have that discussion, because this is a movie that especially now that Scarlett Johansson's run as Black Widow is done in the MCU, like seeing her different personalities and her different acting abilities, and this was definitely an interesting one. I would love to see, especially like when you had movies like Ghost in the Shell and stuff like that, where it's like kind of like going still kind of typecasting her as like something. This is completely something you've never seen before. So I highly recommend it. Even John, you recommend it, even though it's not as high up for you, but I still think that
like I think if somebody recommended us to watch this movie, I definitely would not say no to it. It's not a movie that I dislike. It's not a movie that I would it's a movie it spurs conversation. It's interesting. It leaves you with questions, but not questions that annoy you. It puts you in a universe I'd like to know more about, but that's fine too.
So our next movie, like you said, it's gonna be a breakup movie. It's a breakup movie, Midsommar. So this is something that we were talking about, behind the scenes. Are we going to make this an Ari Aster episode one day? Are we going to save it? But this just really felt, topical of, what we're doing today. So Midsommar is a movie from Ari Aster that is a horror movie that is 99% daytime, and it's got colors and flowers and beauty. It's got a nice mix of comedy in there too. It's longer. I unfortunately have not seen the director's cut, which I've heard it fleshes out things, and it really expands the world even more. And this is one of those movies that I actually do really want to see that director's cut, similar to Dr. Sleep. Yeah, I feel like similar to Dr. Sleep, that in my review of Dr. Sleep, I literally said of the director's cut, I literally said I have no idea exactly what was added, but I know that I love it. And I feel that would exactly be the same thing for Midsommar, because there's just something about this movie where it's like you can tell that there's something missing. Like, it goes from A to B to like D, and I feel like there's a C missing.
Yeah. And this is a movie that takes its time too. This movie is almost 2.5 hours long, and I'd love to see that. It didn't feel like 2.5 hours. I'd like to see I think it's 31 minutes or 27 or 31 minutes adds to the movie. I'd like to see it. I'm sure it would flush out. So it would definitely answer some questions. I think there's a scene in there that explains a lot of what happens to the characters. Like,
And I think that's my only, like, every time I watch this movie, like, so this is one of those movies that every time I watch it, I'm like, oh fuck, dude, I love this movie so much. Like it's high up on my personal list, but then as the days go on and it starts to sit, I start to like, it doesn't like hold like its weight. And I think it's because of the character stuff that happens at the end. It kind of feels like it's quick, you know what I mean? It kind of like everything with Danny, obviously, all that stuff is fleshed out and all that, but all the side characters, it just feels like it's just, I don't know, it's just missing a little bit. Like, what happens with Josh, like I understand, that scenario of him and, oh my God, now I'm forgetting,
Matt,
the boyfriend's name.
Christian.
Yeah, Christian. When him and Christian like are dealing with a thesis, and they're like competing, and it's like it's one of those things where he's essentially doing what he did in his relationship with Danny, where it's like he's making it sound like it's like not a big deal and all that stuff, and then Josh like, no, dude, like you totally stole my idea. He's like, oh well, I'm gonna do it anyway. So and it's just one of those things where it's like it's showcasing like the relationship aspect of him not being the best friend, the best boyfriend, and all stuff, but also not like completely villainizing men in general, even him to a sense. Like by the end, like he gets his comeuppance, but I feel like it takes its time in building that retribution that we're going to get towards him from Danny in the end. And like, it's one of my favorite, final shots in a horror movie is just when she smiles, because she's at that point, she's just fully invested in everything. And she's now become the center of the world. And that's something that she's never had, because even in her home life, her sister with her mental illness was always taking the shine away. So once the parents got taken away, now she doesn't have that. All she has is her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's not even holding her up to the pedestal like, you would expect. So there's so many different layers in this movie that is great. And like I said, there's levels of comedy that just get sprinkled in throughout the entire time. Will Poulter's character, Mark, he is comic relief, but he's not only comic relief. Like, he still has his own, story moments that aren't just completely comic relief. So yeah, this movie's awesome. What are your thoughts in general?
I agree with pretty much almost everything you said. I think the one thing that I really like about Midsommar is just like the subtlety of, I think Under the Skin is the same thing. These are not scary movies. They're unsettling movies. Yeah. They're unsettling. And just the minor details, like the part when like you can hear the girl screaming in the background and everyone's just like, and they just go on with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like there's that. There's the subtle, like, like it's psychedelic. And like, if you stare at the screen, like certain parts of the screen will bleed or certain parts of the screen will distort, and that happens throughout the entire movie. Like, there's always something off in every scene. There's actually the scene when she wins the maypole dancing contest and they're carrying her back on the pedestal. In the trees, they superimpose like her sister's dead body, like in the trees, if you look closely enough.
Wow, I never noticed that.
So there's little, they're throughout the entire movie. Like, the attention to detail that Ari Aster did in this movie is like out of this world. Like, I can only imagine like the amount of time they spent in post, like adding in all those little like those pulls and fades and all times, like, when she's breathing and the flowers are breathing on her head, it's those things make the movie. I mean, it's a great movie, but that makes the movie.
Yeah. And it's one of those ones that's what separates like Ari Aster from other directors working today. It's like he's an artist, but he's also like, he tells good stories. Like, it's not just style over substance. He's able to combine both. Like that's what everyone talks about, like in Hereditary, with all the, the artwork and the different figures that she's building, how it's able to blend it. And so he does a great job, and that's like his style. So I'm definitely curious to see how he's going to be able to keep that up, in his career, or if that's one of the things that you can only do so much without becoming repetitive. But yeah, like I said,
I think he'll be fine. I don't think he has that kind of talk about that kind of arc that M. Night Shyamalan had in the beginning, and that fell off. But I don't think Ari Aster is relying on the same type of stuff that M. Night did. Like, I think he'll be fine. And the one thing I love about his movies, not Hereditary had a little bit of it. Midsommar has a ton of it. Foreshadowing when you're watching it the second, third time around.
Oh yeah,
everything is laid out all over the place.
They had the scene when they show the quilt, when it actually does the whole bear stuff, the pubes, the period blood. It showcases all of that, and it's one of those ones where, like, holy shit, dude! Like, you have no idea what to expect going in, and then when you get there, you're like, oh my god, it told me it was going to do this.
Yes. Everything, even like in the dialogue when they walk past the bear and the kid's like, that's a bear.
I mean, sometimes it's funny to be on the nose. The first time you saw this, what did you think when you finally realized that that these were like sacrifices that were being made, and it wasn't just a trip? So, because it could have been one of two ways. Like, it could have been one of things where they like essentially Cabin in the Woods it, or they showed up, or not Cabin, but Evil Dead it. They showed up and they just kind of stumbled upon it, or and then they just happened to be added to the ritual and all that stuff. And they, kind of, or obviously in this case, they were recruited and they were kind of like brought in for reasons.
I'd say the funny thing, this is a really horrible comparison to make, because the one movie is like straight to video garbage and Midsommar is Midsommar. But there's a movie called 2001 Maniacs. It's kind of the same, where like a bunch of people stumble upon like this old school Confederate community in the South, and they are also one by one taken to be eaten. But it's kind of the same thing. Like, if you're in there and you're with your friends, and then there's the other couple that's not part of the friends, but people just start vanishing, and like no one even is like, it's explained away in kind of like a gaslighting kind of way to everybody that's left. Like, oh, whatever. So like that in and of itself is like unsettling. It's unsettling. The fact that they just put them at ease so easily. Even when the one girl's boyfriend like vanishes, and she's like, he would never do that. And they just like No, everything's good. It's good.
They're like,
It
we
was
didn't have a
the,
choice, you know. We
we didn't have time.
one. He's like, oh, I could have sat on his lap, and they were just there. Yeah, they try and play it off, and then that's when it starts to raise the questions of like, something's not right here.
And then even when like when Josh and Mark disappear and Christian's like, we had nothing to do with this. We want to distance ourselves as much as possible.
Yep.
We would be embarrassed. I was like, dude.
Yeah, that's a great term you use, gaslighting.
Yeah.
Like that is definitely something that Christian's just the king of in this because
Yeah.
like I said, he's not doing anything that's outright evil and completely dickish. It's like the subtleness, and that
He's a coward because, like,
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is Christian's a coward because he's telling his friends he wants to get away from this girl. Like, you know, she's too, and she has a lot. She has a ton of baggage. Plus the fact that but then if her family dies, and it's like, okay, well, I can't break up with her now. But he wanted to break up with her the entire time. He was just afraid to be alone.
Exactly. And it's one of those where it's like like I said, it does a good job of showing the duality of both sides of a relationship. It's of the perspectives of his perspective. Like I said, he's not a complete dickbag, but he's also does a lot of dick stuff. She is not a damsel in distress because she does have baggage, but she also has stuff where it's like, hey, you know, this could be better, or I don't want to feel like a burden. And it does a great job of kind of showcasing the entire, you know, spectrum of this relationship, and it's not completely one side. And I truly respect that. And it's definitely going to be interesting going into our final movie later, because I don't know if we'll be able to say that as much. But final thoughts on Midsommar. Where does it rank for you in terms of recent horror movies, and how does it compare to Hereditary? And what are your general thoughts on it?
I like Hereditary too. You know, I think Midsommar is definitely a 4.5. I mean, I think if I see the director's cut, it might be a 5 because I do feel that I'm going to see even more awesome stuff in that however long, like half hour of extra footage. But I think just like Midsommar is the kind of movie where it's like a Where's Waldo painting, you know, like come to life. It's like every time you watch it, and I'm not just saying that. Every time you watch it, you're going to see something absolutely new that you missed. Like every single inch of every single like frame is chock full of information. And also Ari Aster kind of did that thing that he did in Hereditary where like at the end when Christian's running around, there's just like people from the commune just like stationed just almost off camera, just like how they had in Hereditary, they had the naked old people kind of just off camera. So it was good to see like that kind of callback to just like the unsettling like creepiness of how like you're trapped. You're like it doesn't feel trapped because you're in this wide open Swedish valley, but you are trapped. Yeah, so for a 4.5 for me.
There you go. So this one, like I talked about earlier, like I've watched this 3 or 4 times, and literally after every watch, I'm like 5 star, 5 star, 5 star. And then as I'm going through my rankings and I'm going through my movies and stuff, I'm like, all right, maybe this doesn't have to be 5 star, and I bump it down. So I swear to God, this and ironically, Dr. Sleep are 2 of the movies that I just keep going back and forth of, are they 5? Are they're in and out? And it has nothing to do with the movies. And I just feel like it's that weird director's cut thing of like,
I think Dr. Sleep's a 5 for me, man. That movie's beautiful. Like I think
it is. It's just the weird director's cut thing of like, whenever I watch it, I feel like 2 days later doesn't hold as well. And it's one of those where it's like, I feel like it's the day when it finally sticks, it's gonna stick, and it's probably gonna just be super high, you know, like Hereditary has been for me. It's one of those where it's like it's there, and it's just something. It's just how my dumb brain works. But yes, I love this movie. You don't feel the length, you know, as much as you would assume. At least, you know, I'm not acting like it's a breezy 90-minute feel, but for a 2.5 hour movie, it feels roughly about 2 hours, 2:50.
And it needs that time. It needs that time. I think if this was like a 90-minute like Blumhouse feature, it would suck. It would be horrible if it's just like, you know, like one of those crammed, like if they gave it the fire starter treatment, it would be horrible. But like 2.5, almost 2.5 hours. Actually, it feels really good. Like it sets everything up, and like you're right, it sets everything up, and still they still cut a ton, but it still feels okay. I would like to see what was cut.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to one day finally watch that director's cut and truly get my full opinions on it. All right, so now we are going into the topic of discussion, men. Let's just start. You're the freshest out of it. I saw it yesterday, or I saw it Friday, and you saw it today. So I'll let you start.
Yeah.
Review.
I think without spoiling anything, but what I said to Henry, like I was texting him, I was like, you know, this is the kind of movie where I don't think I could spoil it, even if I tried. I couldn't even spoil this movie for you. It is. It definitely takes you down like a familiar story. It's a very familiar story for like the first hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. Then it takes a left turn into like what the fuckville, and it holds you underwater for 15 minutes. Yeah, I guess all in all, this is a story about, a woman whose husband, she was in a very, very abusive marriage. The husband was a total narcissist, and they get in a fight. He hits her. She throws him out of the apartment, and it's left kind of ambiguous whether he dies by accident or dies by suicide, but he dies. That is not debatable. He dies. So some undisclosed time after the death, she goes to the country to like decompress, and she finds this really cool like Airbnb out in the country, and just then weird stuff starts happening. And we don't want to spoil the entire movie, but it involves a lot about men. There's weird men around her cottage.
So one thing that I at least, I don't know if it's interpretation or maybe whatever, but I don't think that she was in an abusive relationship. I even think she mentions it. She was like, he's never done that before. It's one of those where it's like she's just a strong female character that one is one too many. So I don't feel like she was in an abusive relationship. I feel like it got
psychologically abusive.
Yeah, I still wouldn't say abusive. I would still say more of like just kind of like the Christian thing where it's like he doesn't realize he's as bad as he is, but I feel like it's not like outright like the themes that we're going to get into later. I feel like are on the nose, but I feel like at this one they did a good job with at least the husband relationship of not completely making him as evil, but also showcasing like she's a strong female character, so she's able to get out of it. Like she's smart, she's not a dumb whatever.
I think I disagree with you there. I do think that they were trying to paint him as very emotionally manipulative and abusive to her. And like what we're seeing is like the last straw. It's her finally standing up for herself. And that's why he is like pulling everything out of like the narcissist playbook. Like when he's sitting on the bed and she's standing up. And then the scene when he grabs the phone out of her hand, there's definitely like a controlling, manipulative slant they're giving to all those flashback scenes. And that could be deliberate. It could be like in her view, it could be her memory. I mean, that's not exactly what happened, but given what they've given us in the movie, it's definitely painting it to be like she's the victim of a narcissist, or was the victim of a narcissist prior to his death. That's how I took it.
Maybe, and I don't know. It's one of those ones because we only see the perspective, of their relationship on that final day, so it's hard to tell, long term. But I guess that what I'm saying is, so it at that point though, it does a good job of like showing her as like a strong character, and like you said, decompress out in the country, and her friend even offers like to go stay. She's like, no, I need to do this for me. You know what I mean? And then like when things start to get weird, and her friend's like, yo, fuck that, like this is your time, you need this, and it does a good job of that. The scene that that we have right here on our thumbnail, this scene is awesome. Like there's no like ifs, ands, or but. Like the editing of this scene, the way it's shot, the
sound, perfect.
The deliverance, the patience, it does a great job. Like that is the peak of this movie, at least for me personally. And it's one of those where it's like I was hoping that this movie was going to be this scene, essentially like how I felt the entire time, instead of being, what it becomes. And I ended up giving it 3 stars because this is a movie that the highs, there's, it's not that long of a movie, so it doesn't have that many highs, but the highs, stick with me, like, that tunnel scene, just her generally as a character, the different, usage of lights and blinking, and it does a really good job of not necessarily jump scares, but just good editing and good creepiness. Like all that stuff is awesome. Like
there's one really good jump scare and like another half jump scare. There's one really good jump scare in the movie, I'll tell you that much. And then there's another one that's like would have been a jump scare if they executed a little bit better.
Yeah.
And definitely like the motion sensor lights and stuff. There's lots of good. There's like I think I agree with you. There's lots of like, oh, this had such potential and it didn't do anything. And then the ending, without spoiling it, don't think I could, even if I explained it for 5 minutes straight. If you take the ending literally, it really takes you out of the movie. If you take the ending as like a metaphor, it still takes you out of the movie because you're like, well, what does that even mean then? And then you kind of figure it out and you're like, oh, that's a little heavy-handed, So it's either like literally the weirdest thing you've ever seen, or it's a very heavy-handed metaphor. So I would agree with you at 3 stars.
Yeah. So so it's one of those metaphors that I understand what it was going for, and I'll vaguely say of just the reoccurring in this, that's the metaphor it's going for, the reoccurring of just, regardless of who, it just keeps happening. And it's one of those where it's like, I get that. Like, it's not necessarily technically confusing, but and from an artistic perspective, like, I did kind of enjoy watching that. And I just wished it would have, like, so a movie that I had an issue with of its heavy-handed approach is A Promising Young Woman, and like me and like only like two other people are on the same page, but a lot of people love it. And essentially the premise of that movie, it's like, hey, rape is bad. And it's like, yeah, we get that, don't get me wrong, I know it needs to be talked about, but like, if you're going to have a movie about that, have something to say other than just the black and white statement of, boom, this is bad. We're similar in this movie, like, being a creepy man is bad, essentially, you know what I mean? But it's like, do something with it. And I think
it's beyond even that. I think the fact that, like, and I'm not spoiling anything here, like, all the characters she meets in the town around the cottage, like her landlord, the man she meets in the woods, the priest, the little boy, or the little boy character, all look the same. So, like,
it's an archetype.
Yeah. So, like, men are at heart similar, if not the same, is like what they're saying.
Exactly. And it's one of those where it's like, is it hereditary? Is it in the genes, or is it, whatever? And it's one of those where it's like, I get it. You know what I mean? And like, the imagery, it does a really good job. The score is nice. Jessie Buckley is fantastic. Like, I will say, like, nothing against her. Like, she is fantastic.
She knocked it out of the park. Her acting in this movie is really, really, really good. Really good.
And I love Alex Garland. Like, in theory, if I were to consider this a miss, this would be the only miss in Garland's filmography. You know what I mean? Like, even though, like, he only wrote it, but even though, I don't love The Beach, like, his filmography in general, it's like one of those where it's like, yeah, like, I kind of want to make him a strength in, like, trivia. You know what I mean? I love his stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Writing and directing. So it's one of those where it's like,
this isn't a miss. It's like a misfire, I guess. Yeah. It's definitely not a miss. Like, I get it. I totally get it, and I enjoyed it. But like, I think it's everything is lost. I don't know if it was edited poorly or what, but like, a lot of what they were going for gets lost in what they did at the end, I think.
Yeah. And it's one of those where it's like, I feel like you have to go full 2001: A Space Odyssey and kind of leave it ambiguous by the end, or you need to just kind of wrap it up differently, or have some sort of twist, or, you know what I mean? And the one thing I will say, like, it tries to be metaphorical but literal at the same time with that ending. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, then the friend shows up, and like enough of the what you thought might have been a delusion or hallucination is actually real.
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, what exactly is real? Did she actually?
Yeah, well, that would have been, like I said, without spoilers. If the friend would have showed up and everything is normal, then that would have been like, wow, fuck yes, boom.
Yeah,
borderline 5 stars. But because it's real, it's like, like, now it's just weird.
If it's real, then what was real? And like, but if it's real, then you don't know what happened. Like, you have no idea what happened if it's real.
Is what happened. Like I said, once again, without spoiling, there's censors, and the use of the censors is fantastic from like a horror artistic approach. But if that's real, then like, now we're getting into like fantasy sci-fi at this point, and it's like, you can't be both, or, you know what I mean? It's kind of like a cop out now at that point. You know what I mean? Now your metaphor is fantasy, but your movie isn't fantasy, and that's just weird. And like, like you said, misfire. So yeah. 3 stars for me. I was thinking about 2, but I did like enough of that movie, and I know that even though I might not watch this that often, there are going to be scenes that I will talk about again, and that doesn't happen with 2-star movies that often. So I definitely had to probably keep it at that 3 range.
I'm kind of on the other end of the 3. I'm like 3. I could be talked into a 3.5, but it's definitely. But the ending really just like was like a real punch in the stomach for me. It was like a 3. No. It's just like, you're right, because it's that whole like. So I mean, I don't mind an ambiguous ending, and I definitely don't mind leaving a movie with questions. What I do mind is when you try to pass off both things as happening. Like, if it's real or fake, and you try to pass off both of them, like, you can't. I think that's like a cardinal sin. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, you're 100% right with the final cap scene at the end, with the friend showing up. That would be like if at the end of Get Out, Rod showed up, and like, it was just Chris standing over everybody's dead bodies. Like, it's like, oh, wait a minute, like, he's crazy. Like, that would be different.
Yeah.
But like, that's exactly what they did with this movie. It would be like if at the end of Get Out, Chris was like, a homicidal schizophrenic, and he had killed the entire Armitage family, and there was no plot.
Yeah, the movie before that was his perspective of white would kill him, but then he ended up being that's essentially
That is exactly it. So imagine if Get Out was written like that. That is what Men is. That is exactly what Men is.
So yeah, I didn't hate it, and this is a movie that I when it comes out on VOD, I'm gonna show my roommate just to like share the weirdness and get her perspective, because movies like this, you don't want to be the only one to have seen it. Essentially,
you will get, if you are like fans of weird like body horror. If you're a David Cronenberg fan, you will love the last 15 minutes of this movie, because there is some weird body horror shit going on in the last 15 minutes. And actually, I don't know how many previews did you get before Men when you saw it in the theater? I got so many. I got like seven.
Yeah, I got a decent amount.
Yeah, did you get the new Cronenberg trailer?
I did not watch that.
Oh, that looks awesome. We're going to be reviewing that in a few months.
Yeah, I definitely saw a review for that now. Actually, someone's watched it, so whenever it's up, I'll definitely be down for that. But
so many previews before that movie.
So yeah, this is a movie that I'm happy I'd seen, but I wish it was better. That's probably the best.
I agree 100% with that statement. I love this movie like that. I love Jesse Buckley, but the negatives are too much to overcome to give it anything higher than 3.
Yeah, when we get there, it shows that Alex Garland is a great filmmaker, and maybe this wasn't for me. I'm definitely seeing mixed reviews, so we're not the only ones. It's not like we're crazy. It's one of those where it's like, there's an audience for it somewhere, and I'm happy for them. So yeah, that was this week's episode of There Will Be Horror. This was if you saw the the theme of the penises under the skin as the men are being abducted and they're going into the void. You have their boners. Midsommar, you definitely see Christian's wee. And in this movie, you definitely see some homeless, creepy men dong. So it's one of those where, yeah, if you're in for the dong, check out these 3. If you were anti-dong, probably not. You're probably not wanting to watch these 3 anyway. So yeah, that's that. We don't necessarily have anything specific on the dock for next week. We definitely have to work that out because no major releases are coming out. So we'll kind of figure out what we're gonna schedule for next week. But
I thought we did flesh that out. Did we do that? We didn't do that yet.
Well, I forgot, so I was kind of just buying time.
Yeah, keep vamping. I'll try to find it in our chat.
Yeah. So it's one of those ones where men. Alex Garland, by the way, I'll just say this now. Alex Garland, my favorite Alex Garland movie is Ex Machina. My favorite Ari Aster movie, as of right now, is Hereditary. But if I ever see that director's cut, maybe Midsommar, jump it. And then my favorite Jonathan Glazer movie is, in fact, Under the Skin. And my favorite John David Mitchell movie that I thought was the director of this for a millisecond is, in fact, It Follows. So that is the vamping I was able to do there. Were you able to find out what's on the dock for next week?
I do not, but you know what? We'll put up a thing. I couldn't even search in the document to figure it out, but
we will figure it out.
We definitely have it planned.
Yeah,
and you're going to be surprised.
Yeah, exactly. Surprise. So yeah, with that said, make sure you follow us both on Letterboxd so you can love or hate our reviews of different movies. Make sure you check us out, or at least myself, on Wednesdays. Let's Rank Stuff with Austin Pascal. This week we're going to be ranking written and directed by Shane Black outside of Lethal Weapon, since we'd already covered those ones. Then next week we're going to be doing Mission Impossible. Then the following week, I don't remember, and then Jurassic Park. So we're definitely have a fun week there. Make sure you check me out on Movie Battleground, as I am the debate champion. Going to be debating real soon. Make sure you check out John. If he doesn't get opponent's choice and his opponents don't get spinner's choice, he's pretty great at this. Make sure you check out the channel. My birthday free for all is going to be edited up on the channel. John's birthday horror free for all, which obviously this is a horror podcast, so you might check that out, is going to be the weekend of June 9th, so June 10th or 11th, depending on the day that we set on. Not sure if it's going to be live or edited, so we'll figure that out as the time comes. But happy early birthday to you. Happy specific birthday to me, because yes, this is my birthday today.
It is Henry's birthday. Happy birthday to Henry. And listen, like and subscribe. If just for Henry's birthday, he would love that for his birthday if you would like and subscribe. He would also like it if you joined the Facebook group. So I don't know what you're waiting for. You should do it. And hopefully someday we'll get to update that thing that says 82 members. It'll say 182 pretty soon. We'll update.
We're up to 89, so we are definitely progressing there. So
tell your friends, tell your parents, tell your neighbor, tell your weird neighbor that likes horror. Even if they don't like horror, there's other stuff on this channel that I guarantee they'll like. If they like movies,
absolutely,
this is There Will Be Movies. So come on, let's go.
There you go. So with that said, my name is Henry Confidential. That is John. Make sure you hit the notification bell because we are here every Monday. Don't know the exact time. This is actually the earliest we've done this so far, but make sure you show up every Monday with us, regardless of time, because there will be horror.